Why some people succeed, but slowly lose their soul. There is a strange moment that happens in the lives of some very successful people. It doesn't happen when they fail. It doesn't happen when they struggle. It happens after they win. After the promotion finally comes. After the bank account grows larger than they ever imagined. After their name begins to carry weight in rooms they once dreamed of entering. From the outside, everything looks perfect. They have the career people admire, the lifestyle others envy, the kind of success that makes family members proud and strangers curious. But somewhere deep inside, something feels different. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a quiet, unsettling feeling that something important has slowly slipped away. At first, they ignore it. After all, how could anything be wrong? This is the life they worked so hard for. The late nights, the sacrifices, the years of pushing forward when everyone else stopped. It all led here. And yet, sometimes in the quiet moments, when the noise of the world fades away, a strange question begins to rise inside their mind. Why does this feel emptier than I expected? It's a question that many people are afraid to ask, because asking it almost feels ungrateful. How could someone who has so much feel like something is missing? But this quiet tension has followed humanity for centuries. It's the tension between achievement and meaning, between success and the soul. History is filled with people who reached the highest levels of success and still felt lost. Powerful leaders, famous artists, brilliant entrepreneurs, people who seemed to have everything. And yet many of them quietly confessed the same thing. The more they gained, the more something inside them slowly faded. Not overnight, not in some dramatic collapse, but gradually, like a candle burning down little by little. The strange part is that no one sets out to lose their soul. No one wakes up one morning and decides, today I will trade my inner peace for success. It happens far more subtly than that. It happens through small compromises, through quiet shifts in priorities, through the slow transformation of what once mattered most. At the beginning of the journey, success feels exciting. It feels like progress, like proof that your effort is paying off. And in many ways, success itself is not the problem. There is nothing wrong with building something meaningful. There is nothing wrong with pursuing excellence. There is nothing wrong with achieving great things. But something begins to change when success slowly stops being a tool and starts becoming an identity. When achievements become the measure of your worth. When recognition becomes the fuel your heart depends on. When silence becomes uncomfortable because it forces you to face questions you no longer want to ask. Questions like, who am I becoming? What is all of this really for? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, what have I slowly left behind while chasing everything ahead? This is a story the Bible quietly warns about again and again. Not through loud condemnation, but through the lives of people who experienced it firsthand. Kings who gained power but lost wisdom. Leaders who gained influence but lost humility. Men who gained the world but found their souls slowly drifting away from the very purpose they were meant to live for. And the tragedy is that from the outside, their lives often looked more successful than ever. The applause grew louder. The wealth increased. The influence expanded. But internally, something sacred was slowly eroding. Because the soul does not disappear in one dramatic moment. It drifts. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, until one day a person realizes they have climbed higher than they ever imagined, but feel farther away from who they truly are. And this is the quiet paradox many people discover too late. Success can build your life, but if you are not careful, it can also slowly reshape your heart. The world celebrates the moment someone reaches the top, but it rarely asks the deeper question, what did it cost them to get there? Because sometimes the most dangerous losses in life are not the ones that happen in failure. They are the ones that happen in success. The losses no one notices. The ones hidden behind smiles, achievements, and impressive accomplishments. Losses that happen not in your career, but in your soul. And the truth is, many people don't realize what's happening until they are already far down the road. Until they reach the destination they once dreamed about. And suddenly realize something inside them feels strangely distant. This video is about that quiet journey. About why some people succeed in ways the world celebrates, but slowly lose something far more important along the way. And more importantly, how to recognize the signs before that happens to you. Because success itself is not the danger. The real danger is becoming someone your soul no longer recognizes. Every great journey usually begins with something simple. A dream. Not the kind of dream people brag about online or display proudly in public, but the quiet kind that lives deep inside a person's heart. The kind that grows slowly over years. The kind that whispers, "Your life could become something meaningful." For many people, the pursuit of success begins with good intentions. A young man studies late into the night because he wants to give his family a better future. A woman works tirelessly because she wants to build something that will matter in the world. An entrepreneur starts a small idea in a cramped room, believing that maybe, just maybe, it could grow into something extraordinary. At the beginning, the motivation often feels pure. There is passion. There is excitement. There is purpose. People imagine success not as something selfish, but as something meaningful. They imagine the good they will do when they finally reach the place they are aiming for. They imagine helping others, creating opportunities, making a difference. In those early days, the dream feels alive in a healthy way. But what many people don't realize is that the journey towards success slowly begins to reshape a person's heart long before they notice it. At first, the changes are almost invisible. A little more pressure, a little more responsibility, a little more attention from others. And attention can be powerful, because attention slowly teaches a person something dangerous if they are not careful. It teaches them that their value is connected to their results, that their worth is connected to their achievements, that their identity is tied to what they accomplish. This shift rarely happens intentionally. It simply grows out of the environment success creates. The world rewards results. It celebrates winners. It admires the people who reach the top. And the more someone succeeds, the more those signals become impossible to ignore. People begin to introduce them differently. Their opinions suddenly carry more weight. Doors that were once closed begin to open. The same world that once ignored them now listens carefully when they speak. And little by little, something begins to happen inside their heart. Success starts feeling less like something they do, and more like something they are. This is the moment when success begins to move from the outside of a person's life to the center of their identity. And that shift changes everything. Because when success becomes identity, losing success begins to feel like losing yourself. This is why the pursuit becomes more intense, more urgent, more consuming. The dream that once inspired a person slowly begins to control them. But here is the important truth. The dream itself is not the problem. Ambition is not evil. Desire to grow is not wrong. In fact, throughout history, many of the most influential people were deeply driven individuals who pursued greatness with incredible determination. Even in the Bible, we see stories of people who rose to extraordinary heights. Men like Joseph. Joseph began his life as a young dreamer. He believed God had placed something unique inside his future. His journey eventually led him through betrayal, hardship, and imprisonment before he finally rose to become one of the most powerful leaders in Egypt. Yet through all those changes, Joseph held on to something many people lose. He never allowed power to replace purpose. But not everyone manages to keep that balance. Another story shows the other side of success. The story of King Solomon. Solomon began his life with incredible humility. When God offered him anything he wanted, Solomon did not ask for wealth, power, or fame. He asked for wisdom. And because of that request, Solomon became one of the wisest leaders in history. His kingdom prospered. His influence spread far beyond Israel. His wealth became legendary. People traveled from distant lands just to hear him speak. From the outside, Solomon's life looked like the ultimate example of success. But something subtle began to change over time. The success that once flowed from wisdom slowly began to replace it. The influence that once strengthened his purpose slowly began to distract him from it. And the same blessings that elevated his life eventually became the environment where his soul slowly drifted. That is the quiet danger hidden in success. Not that success destroys people immediately, but that it slowly reshapes their priorities while they are too busy moving forward to notice. Because the higher someone climbs, the easier it becomes to believe they are responsible for everything they have achieved. Pride rarely arrives suddenly. It grows quietly in the background. At first it sounds like confidence. Then it begins to sound like certainty. Eventually it begins to sound like independence from the very source that once guided the journey. This is where the shift becomes dangerous. Because when a person begins to believe they no longer need guidance, they slowly stop listening. And when they stop listening, they begin drifting. Not away from success. Often they become even more successful. But they begin drifting away from something far more important. The soul. The strange thing about this process is that it can happen while everything in life appears to be improving. Income grows. Influence grows. Opportunities multiply. But deep inside, the quiet connection to purpose begins to fade. The person who once asked meaningful questions about life becomes too busy to ask them anymore. The person who once cared deeply about integrity begins making small compromises that feel necessary to maintain their success. The person who once pursued a dream slowly becomes someone who is simply protecting their position. And protection eventually replaces purpose. Because once success becomes identity, maintaining it becomes everything. People begin guarding their image, protecting their reputation, avoiding risks that might threaten the life they built. And slowly, the dream that once felt alive begins to feel like something that must constantly be defended. This is how success can quietly begin to change a person. Not through sudden corruption, but through gradual transformation. The dream that once started pure slowly becomes something heavier, more demanding, more consuming, until one day, a person who once chased success for meaningful reasons finds themselves chasing it simply because they no longer know who they are without it. And that is the moment when success begins to become dangerous. Not because success itself is wrong, but because identity has moved from the soul to the achievement. And when that happens, the soul slowly begins to lose its voice. Most people do not notice this shift while it is happening. They are too focused on the next goal, the next opportunity, the next milestone waiting just ahead. But the journey toward success is not only shaping a person's life, it is shaping their heart. And if they are not careful, the same dream that once inspired them will slowly become the thing that pulls them away from who they were meant to become. Because the greatest danger of success is not failure. The greatest danger is forgetting why the journey began in the first place. And that is where the deeper transformation begins. Because once success becomes identity, something else quietly follows. A new kind of hunger. A hunger that success can never fully satisfy. And that is exactly where the next part of this journey begins. There is a moment in the journey toward success that most people never notice. It does not happen when the first opportunity appears. It does not happen when the first victory arrives. It happens much later, after success has been repeated enough times that it begins to shape the way a person sees themselves. At the beginning, success feels like something external. You achieve something. You accomplish a goal. You reach a milestone that once seemed impossible. And you feel proud of the effort that brought you there. But slowly, something deeper begins to change. Success stops being something you did. It starts becoming something you are. This transformation can feel natural at first. After all, the world constantly reinforces it. People begin to introduce you differently. They mention your accomplishments before they mention your name. They admire the results they can see. They celebrate the achievements that make your life appear impressive. And little by little, those external signals begin shaping your internal identity. You begin to think about yourself through the lens of what you have accomplished. Not intentionally, but gradually. The question shifts. Instead of asking, "Who am I becoming?" a person begins asking something very different. What have I achieved lately? This shift is subtle, but it is powerful. Because when identity becomes connected to success, something else quietly appears in the background. Fear. Not the kind of fear people openly admit, but the quiet fear of losing the identity that success has created. If your sense of worth is tied to your achievements, then every new challenge carries more pressure. If your identity is built on what you accomplish, then failure begins to feel like a threat to who you are. This is why many successful people begin working harder than ever, not because they need more success, but because they need to protect the identity that success has created. The applause of the world becomes something they rely on. Recognition becomes fuel. Validation becomes oxygen. And the strange part is that the more success someone gains, the more they may begin depending on that validation to maintain their sense of self. This is where the danger quietly begins. Because the human soul was never meant to build its identity on something as fragile as achievement. Achievements can change. Careers can shift. Reputation can rise and fall. But when identity is rooted in those things, the soul becomes unstable. And so people chase more success to maintain the feeling they once gained from it. The first achievement felt incredible. The second one felt satisfying. But eventually something strange happens. Each new success begins to feel slightly less fulfilling than the last. So a person pushes further. Higher goals, bigger results, greater recognition. They tell themselves they are simply growing. But deep inside, something else is happening. They are chasing a feeling that success can no longer fully provide. This is the cycle that traps many people who appear successful from the outside. The pursuit becomes endless. There is always another level to reach, another milestone to conquer, another achievement waiting just ahead. But the more they climb, the more their identity becomes tied to staying at the top. And that creates a dangerous tension inside the soul. Because life inevitably brings moments where success slows down, where progress becomes harder, where circumstances change. And when those moments arrive, the person who built their identity on success suddenly faces a crisis. Not just a career challenge, an identity crisis. Because if success defines who you are, what happens when success disappears? This is the question that terrifies many people who have built their lives around achievement. And so they push even harder. They protect their image more carefully. They become more cautious about how others see them. Because maintaining success now feels like maintaining their entire sense of self. This is why the pursuit of success can slowly become exhausting. Not physically, but emotionally and spiritually. The person who once chased success out of passion now chases it out of necessity. They feel like they cannot slow down. They cannot step away. They cannot risk losing the identity they have built. The world continues to applaud them. But deep inside, something begins to feel fragile. Because the soul is quietly asking a question that success cannot answer. Who are you when the applause stops? This question has haunted some of the most successful people in history. Celebrities who achieved worldwide fame. Leaders who reached the highest levels of power. Entrepreneurs who built empires that changed industries. Many of them reached a moment where they realized something surprising. They had built an extraordinary life. But somewhere along the way, they had stopped building themselves. Their success had grown faster than their soul. And when that imbalance grows too large, something inside a person begins to feel empty. Not because they failed, but because success cannot replace purpose. Success can give you influence. Success can give you opportunity. Success can give you recognition. But success cannot give you identity. Identity must come from something deeper, something stable, something that exists even when success rises and falls. This is why the scriptures repeatedly warn about the danger of placing your heart in things that can change. Not because achievement is wrong, but because the human soul needs a foundation stronger than achievement. When identity is rooted in something eternal, success becomes a tool. But when identity is rooted in success itself, success becomes a master. And masters always demand more. More time, more attention, more sacrifices. Eventually, the person who once chased success to build a meaningful life finds themselves serving success just to maintain the life they already built. And this is where the next transformation begins. Because once success becomes identity, something even more subtle begins to happen. The soul does not collapse. It begins to drift. Quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. And that quiet drift is where the real danger lies. No one loses their soul in a single moment. It would almost be easier if it happened that way. If there were one dramatic decision, one obvious turning point, one clear moment when a person could say, that was the day everything changed. But the truth is far quieter than that. The soul rarely collapses suddenly. It drifts. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. And that is what makes it so dangerous. Because while a person's outer life may be improving, more success, more recognition, more opportunities, something inside may be slowly moving in the opposite direction. At first, the drift is so small it feels harmless. A little less time spent in reflection. A little more time chasing the next goal. A little less attention to the quiet voice of conscience. A little more attention to the loud expectations of the world. None of these changes seem dramatic on their own. They feel like normal adjustments. After all, successful people are busy. They have responsibilities. They have demands placed on their time. And so certain things slowly move to the background of their lives. The quiet moments become rarer. The deep questions become less frequent. The practices that once nourished the soul begin to feel less urgent than the tasks that drive success forward. And the strange thing is that this shift often happens while life appears to be improving. From the outside, everything looks stronger than ever. The career is thriving. The influence is growing. The achievements continue to multiply. But internally, the center of gravity begins to shift. What once guided a person's life, purpose, humility, spiritual awareness, slowly becomes secondary to performance and progress. This is what spiritual drift looks like. It is not rebellion. It is not sudden corruption. It is simply distance. Distance from the things that once grounded the soul. Distance from the values that once shaped a person's character. Distance from the quiet awareness that life is about more than just moving forward. Drift happens when a person becomes so focused on success that they stop paying attention to the direction of their heart. And the frightening part is that drift often feels comfortable at first. Because success creates momentum. Momentum makes everything feel exciting. Every new opportunity creates the illusion that life is moving exactly the way it should. But momentum can carry a person far away from their original purpose if they are not careful. Imagine a ship crossing the ocean. If the ship's course shifts by just 1 degree, the difference is almost impossible to notice in the beginning. For hours, the journey looks exactly the same. But over time, that tiny shift changes the entire destination. By the time the mistake becomes visible, the ship may already be hundreds of miles away from where it intended to go. The soul drifts in the same way, not through dramatic decisions, but through tiny changes repeated over time. A little less honesty with yourself. A little more compromise in order to maintain success. A little more pride when achievements begin to accumulate. A little less humility when people begin to admire you. These changes rarely feel dangerous in the moment. In fact, they often feel normal. After all, success changes a person's environment. People begin treating them differently. Opportunities expand. Influence increases. And influence has a strange effect on the human heart. The more people listen to you, the easier it becomes to believe that you always deserve to be heard. The more people admire you, the easier it becomes to believe that you deserve admiration. The more people celebrate your success, the easier it becomes to believe that you are the reason for it. And this is where pride quietly begins to grow. Not the loud arrogance that everyone can see, but the quiet confidence that slowly replaces dependence on God with dependence on yourself. At the beginning of the journey, a person often recognizes how much they need guidance. They pray, they reflect, they seek wisdom. But as success grows, something subtle begins to change. They begin trusting their own judgment more and more. After all, their decisions have been working. Their strategies have been successful. Their instincts have led them to victory again and again. And so the quiet voice of humility slowly becomes quieter. Self-reliance grows stronger. Dependence on God becomes less central. The soul begins drifting away from its source of stability. And yet the world continues applauding. Because the world does not measure the condition of a person's soul. It measures results, influence, impact, numbers. But the soul lives by different measurements. The soul measures peace, integrity, alignment with purpose, connection to something greater than personal success. And when those things begin to fade, the soul feels it long before the world notices. This is why many successful people eventually reach moments of strange discomfort. Moments when everything in life looks impressive, yet something inside feels unsettled. They cannot always explain it. They cannot always name it. But they sense that something important has shifted. Something they once had has quietly moved farther away. Sometimes this realization arrives during moments of silence. Late at night, during a long flight, during a rare break when the noise of daily life fades away. And suddenly the person begins asking questions they have avoided for years. Why am I still chasing this? What am I actually trying to prove? Who have I become during this journey? These questions can feel frightening, because the answers may reveal that success has slowly pulled a person away from the very values that once inspired their journey. And yet, even in these moments, many people choose to ignore the warning. They return to the noise. They return to the momentum. They return to the pursuit that keeps them moving forward. Because stopping to examine the drift would require something difficult. It would require honesty. And honesty can be uncomfortable when it reveals how far the soul has wandered. But this quiet drift is the exact danger the scriptures warn about again and again. Not the danger of success itself, but the danger of success that slowly replaces the things that matter most. Because when success becomes the center of a person's life, everything else begins orbiting around it. Relationships become secondary. Character becomes negotiable. Purpose becomes blurry. And the soul begins fading into the background of a life that looks impressive on the surface. That is the tragedy hidden inside many stories of success. From the outside, people see achievement. But inside, the person may feel farther away from their true self than ever before. And eventually, if the drift continues long enough, a person may reach the very destination they once dreamed about, only to discover they no longer recognize the person who arrived there. And that realization can be one of the most painful moments a human being ever faces. Because by the time someone notices the drift, they may already be living a life built around everything except the one thing they needed to protect the most: their soul. And this is where the next stage of the journey begins. Because the illusion of having everything is often the moment when people finally begin to realize what they may have lost along the way. There is a strange moment that happens in the lives of many successful people. A moment that almost no one talks about. From the outside, everything looks perfect. The goals have been reached. The recognition has arrived. The life they once dreamed about has become reality. And yet, in the middle of that success, something unexpected appears. A quiet emptiness. Not the kind of emptiness caused by failure. Not the pain of losing. But the unsettling feeling that even though you have won, something important still feels missing. At first, most people try to ignore it. They assume the feeling will disappear once the next milestone is reached. After all, that is how success has always worked before. When one goal is accomplished, you simply aim for another. So they push forward again. Another project. Another achievement. Another level to reach. And for a short moment, the excitement returns. The adrenaline comes back. The motivation feels strong again. But something begins to change. The victories do not feel the same as they once did. The celebration becomes shorter. The satisfaction fades faster. And the excitement that once lasted for months now disappears in days, sometimes even hours. This is when a person begins to realize something they never expected. Success can fill your life, but it cannot always fill your soul. The world teaches people that fulfillment comes from reaching higher levels of achievement. More money, more influence, more recognition, more impact. But there is a hidden truth that many people only discover after years of chasing those things. The human soul was not designed to be satisfied by achievement alone. Because achievement answers the question, what have you done? But the soul is asking something different. Who are you becoming? When life becomes focused entirely on what you are accomplishing, it is possible to reach incredible heights, while slowly becoming disconnected from yourself. Disconnected from the deeper purpose that once guided your choices. Disconnected from the values that once shaped your character. Disconnected from the quiet inner peace that comes from living in alignment with what truly matters. At first, that disconnection is hard to recognize. Because success creates noise. Meetings, projects, opportunities, travel, deadlines, responsibilities. Life becomes so full of movement that there is very little time to notice what is happening internally. But eventually, the noise fades for a moment. And when that silence appears, the question returns. Why doesn't this feel the way I thought it would? Many people reach a moment where they finally admit something they have been avoiding. They have spent years building the life they wanted. But somewhere along the way, they stopped building the person they were meant to become. This realization can feel deeply unsettling. Because it reveals a painful possibility. A person can succeed in the eyes of the world, while quietly losing the parts of themselves that mattered most. The compassion they once had, the humility that kept them grounded, the curiosity that made life meaningful, the spiritual awareness that reminded them they were part of something bigger than their career. These things rarely disappear all at once. They fade slowly, like colors that lose their brightness over time. And success, ironically, can accelerate that fading. Because success rewards results, not always character. Success celebrates performance, not always integrity. Success magnifies achievement, but it does not always nurture the inner life of the person achieving it. And when someone spends too many years feeding only one side of their life, the external side, something inside eventually begins to starve. The soul needs nourishment just like the body. It needs reflection. It needs humility. It needs connection with God. It needs purpose that is larger than personal ambition. Without those things, success begins to feel strangely hollow. Not meaningless, but incomplete. And this is the moment when some people make a critical mistake. Instead of asking deeper questions about their life, they assume the problem is simply that they have not reached a high enough level yet. So they chase something bigger. A larger company, more influence, a greater platform, more recognition. They believe that once they reach the next level, the emptiness will finally disappear. But the truth is painful. The emptiness does not disappear by achieving more. Because the emptiness was never caused by lack of success. It was caused by lack of alignment. Alignment between success and purpose. Alignment between ambition and character. Alignment between what a person is building and who they are becoming while building it. Without that alignment, success becomes like drinking salt water. The more you consume, the thirstier you become. This is why some of the most successful individuals in the world have openly spoken about their struggles with meaning. They reached levels of influence that millions of people dream about. Yet they still found themselves asking the same haunting question. Is this really what life is about? That question can feel terrifying, because it forces a person to confront something they have avoided for years. If success is not enough, then what truly is? For many people, this question becomes the beginning of a spiritual awakening. But for others, it becomes something else. A desperate attempt to fill the emptiness with even more success. And the tragedy is that the second path only deepens the problem. Because every new achievement temporarily distracts the soul from its hunger, but never truly feeds it. The applause becomes louder. The accomplishments become greater. The life becomes more impressive. But internally, the distance between success and meaning continues to grow. Until one day, the person realizes something that changes everything. They have spent years winning the game the world taught them to play, but they are no longer sure it was the right game. And that realization leads to the most important question of all. If success alone cannot satisfy the soul, then what was the soul actually created for? That question is where the real journey begins. Because once a person begins asking it honestly, they can no longer continue living exactly the way they did before. Something inside them starts searching for a deeper answer. An answer that success itself could never provide. And that search is what determines whether a person will continue drifting or finally begin returning to the life they were truly meant to live. There is always a price. Not the price people talk about. Not the visible sacrifices that come with ambition, late nights, long hours, relentless discipline. Those are the obvious costs of success, and most people accept them willingly. The real price is quieter than that. It is the cost that slowly accumulates in the unseen parts of a person's life. The parts no one applauds. The parts no one measures. The parts that never appear in a biography or a highlight reel. Because while success builds a public story, the soul lives in the private one. And sometimes those two stories begin moving in very different directions. At the beginning of a journey, a person's priorities are usually clear. Faith matters. Character matters. Relationships matter. There is a sense that life is about more than achievement. That success is meant to be meaningful, not just impressive. But as ambition grows and opportunities multiply, something subtle begins to happen. Life becomes crowded, not with bad things, but with too many important things competing for attention. Every opportunity looks valuable. Every responsibility feels urgent. Every new level of influence brings new demands. And slowly, the space in a person's life begins to shrink. At first, the adjustments seem harmless. A little less time with family this month. A few missed conversations with close friends. A quiet promise to reconnect later when things slow down. A skipped moment of prayer or reflection because the schedule is full. None of these decisions seem dramatic in isolation. But time has a way of turning small patterns into lasting realities. Weeks become months. Months become years. And what once felt temporary quietly becomes permanent. The friendships that once felt effortless begin to fade. The deep conversations become rare. The spiritual practices that once centered the soul become occasional habits rather than daily anchors. Meanwhile, success continues expanding. The career grows. The platform grows. The recognition grows. But the internal foundation that once supported it begins to thin. And eventually, many people reach a moment when they notice something strange. The higher they climb, the fewer people truly know them. They may be surrounded by admiration, but they feel increasingly distant from genuine connection. People know their achievements, They know their reputation. They know their public story. But very few people know the real person behind it. And loneliness can grow even in the middle of influence. This is one of the quiet prices of success that almost no one warns about. Because influence attracts attention, but it does not always create intimacy. Recognition brings admiration, but it does not guarantee understanding. And if a person is not careful, they can slowly trade deep relationships for wide recognition. That trade rarely happens intentionally. It happens gradually. Schedules become too busy. Time becomes too limited. The people who once anchored a person's life begin to occupy smaller spaces within it. And eventually the person realizes something unsettling. The world may know their name, but very few people truly know their heart. At the same time, another quiet price begins to emerge. The pressure to maintain success. Because once a person becomes known for achieving something great, the expectations surrounding them begin to grow. People begin looking to them for answers, for leadership, for results, for consistency. And the weight of those expectations can slowly change the way a person lives. Instead of asking, what is the right thing to do? They begin asking, what will protect the success I have built? Instead of asking, what aligns with my values? They begin asking, what will keep everything moving forward? These questions are subtle shifts, but they change everything. Because once success becomes something that must constantly be protected, fear quietly enters the picture. Fear of losing influence. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of failing publicly. Fear of falling from the level that people now expect. And fear is a powerful force. It can push a person to compromise things they once believed were non-negotiable. Not all at once, but slowly. A small compromise here. A quiet rationalization there. A decision that once would have felt wrong now feels necessary. Because protecting success begins to feel more important than protecting the soul. This is the moment when ambition can quietly begin to reshape a person's character. Not through dramatic corruption, but through repeated compromises that slowly move the boundaries of what feels acceptable. And the frightening part is that the person may not even realize how much they have changed. Because the external rewards keep reinforcing the path they are on. The influence continues. The success continues. The admiration continues. So it becomes easy to assume that everything must still be right. But deep inside, the soul often knows the truth long before the mind admits it. There are moments when the person feels it. A moment of quiet discomfort after making a decision that felt slightly misaligned. A brief feeling of guilt when realizing how little time remains for the things that once mattered most. A strange sense of distance when looking back at the person they used to be. Those moments are like quiet alarms. Signals that something important may be drifting. But alarms can be ignored. And when life moves quickly enough, they often are. The person tells themselves that everything will balance out later. That once this season of pressure passes, they will return to the deeper parts of life. But life has a way of extending busy seasons far longer than expected. And the soul cannot wait forever for attention. Eventually, the quiet price becomes visible. Not always through dramatic collapse. Sometimes through something simpler. A loss of joy. A loss of peace. A loss of clarity about why the journey began in the first place. And when that happens, a person may finally begin to realize something that success alone could never teach them. The greatest danger was never failing to succeed. The greatest danger was succeeding in ways that slowly separated them from the life they were meant to live. Because the soul does not measure life by achievement. It measures life by alignment. Alignment with truth. Alignment with purpose. Alignment with God. And when that alignment is lost, even the most impressive life can begin to feel strangely incomplete. But the story does not have to end there. Because recognizing the price is often the first step towards something far more powerful. A chance to step back. A chance to rediscover what truly matters. A chance to rebuild a life where success and soul no longer stand on opposite sides of the same journey. And that realization leads to the most important turning point of all. The moment when a person must decide what they are truly willing to protect before success takes anything else from them. For a long time, the person keeps moving. They wake up early. They work hard. They continue achieving. From the outside, nothing seems wrong. Their life still looks impressive. Their accomplishments still grow. Their reputation still expands. But deep inside, something has already begun to change. A quiet awareness begins to rise. Not loudly, Not dramatically, just a subtle feeling that something about this life is no longer fully right. At first, they cannot explain it. Everything they once dreamed about is still there. The success, the recognition, the opportunities. Yet somehow, those things do not feel the same anymore. They still matter, but they no longer satisfy the way they once did. This is usually when the person begins asking questions they avoided for years. Questions that success was able to silence before. Questions that now refuse to stay quiet. What am I actually building? Who am I becoming? Is this the life I was meant to live, or just the life I learned to chase? These questions are uncomfortable because they challenge the identity the person has spent years constructing. For a long time, success has been the definition of progress. Success meant moving forward. Success meant doing well. Success meant life was working. But now the person begins to realize something deeper. Progress in the world is not always the same as progress in the soul. You can move forward in one area of life while quietly drifting backward in another. You can gain influence while losing clarity. You can gain recognition while losing connection with God. You can gain wealth while losing peace. And that realization can feel unsettling because it means something many people do not want to admit. The path that led to success may not be the same path that leads to fulfillment. This moment of realization often arrives unexpectedly. Sometimes it appears during a quiet evening when the noise of life finally fades. Sometimes it happens after a major accomplishment that surprisingly feels empty. Sometimes it arrives during a personal crisis that forces the person to slow down. But however it comes, the effect is the same. The person begins to see their life differently. They start noticing things that once felt normal. The exhaustion that never seems to disappear. The relationships that quietly faded during the years of ambition. The spiritual distance that slowly replaced the closeness they once felt with God. The person begins to understand that success did not take their soul away overnight. It happened gradually, through years of small decisions. Years of prioritizing achievement over reflection. Years of pushing forward without asking whether the direction itself was still right. And this realization can create a deep sense of regret. Not because success was wrong, but because something important was neglected along the way. They may think about the earlier version of themselves. The person who once had clear values, clear priorities, clear faith. That version of themselves may have had less influence, but they often had more peace. And the contrast between those two versions can feel painful. Because now the person understands something that was invisible before. Success can amplify who you are, but it cannot replace who you are. If a person builds success on a strong inner foundation, success can become a powerful tool for good. But if that foundation slowly erodes, success begins to expose the cracks that were hidden underneath. This is why the moment of realization is so important. Because it forces a person to confront a simple but profound truth. Life cannot be measured only by what you achieve. It must also be measured by what those achievements are doing to your soul. Are they strengthening it or slowly draining it? Are they bringing you closer to the person God created you to be, or quietly pulling you further away? These questions are not easy to answer because they require honesty, real honesty, the kind that looks beyond appearances, beyond reputation, beyond public success, and asks a deeper question. Am I still living the life I was meant to live? For some people, this moment becomes a turning point. They begin making changes. They slow down. They rebuild relationships. They reconnect with their spiritual life. They start aligning their ambitions with their deeper purpose. But for others, the realization feels too overwhelming. They push the questions aside. They bury the discomfort. They return to the familiar rhythm of success. Because continuing forward feels easier than confronting everything that might need to change. And that is where the true crossroads appears. One path leads deeper into the life they have already built. More success, more recognition, more influence, but also the risk of drifting even further from the soul they once protected. The other path leads somewhere different. Not necessarily away from success, but toward a life where success is no longer the center of everything. A life where faith becomes the foundation again, where character matters as much as achievement, where purpose guides ambition instead of the other way around. Choosing that path requires courage, because it means redefining what success actually means. It means admitting that some things once pursued with great intensity may not have been the most important things after all. And that kind of honesty can feel terrifying, but it can also be incredibly freeing. Because the moment a person recognizes what truly matters, they finally gain the power to rebuild their life around it. And that realization leads to the final question of the journey. A question that every successful person must eventually answer. When everything you worked for is finally within reach, what part of yourself are you willing to lose to keep it? And perhaps even more importantly, what part of yourself must you protect, no matter how successful you become? There comes a moment in some people's lives when the entire definition of success begins to change. Not because they failed, not because they lost everything, but because they finally understood something deeper about life. For years, success looked simple. Climb higher, achieve more, build something impressive, become someone the world respects. That vision drives countless people forward. It fuels ambition. It pushes people through exhaustion. It convinces them that every sacrifice will eventually be worth it. And in many ways, that belief is powerful. Without ambition, many meaningful things would never be created. But ambition alone cannot define a meaningful life. Because eventually, every person who climbs high enough discovers a truth the world rarely talks about. Success can give you many things, but it cannot give you peace if your soul is out of alignment. It cannot give you meaning if your purpose is unclear. It cannot give you fulfillment if the person you have become along the way is someone you barely recognize. This is when a deeper question begins to rise inside the heart. What does success actually mean? For someone who has never questioned it before, this can feel like standing at the edge of an entirely new world. Because redefining success requires undoing years of assumptions. For most of life, success was measured by visible outcomes. Money, status, influence, recognition. But when the soul begins searching for something deeper, those measurements start to feel incomplete. They may still matter, but they are no longer enough. True success begins to look different. It starts with alignment. Alignment between what a person does and who they truly are. Alignment between ambition and integrity. Alignment between external achievement and internal peace. Without that alignment, even the greatest accomplishments can begin to feel strangely hollow. But when alignment exists, even simple achievements can carry deep meaning. This is why some people with enormous influence still feel restless, while others with far less recognition live with quiet contentment. The difference is not always success. The difference is alignment with purpose. Purpose changes everything, because purpose answers a question that ambition cannot. Why does this life matter? When a person begins living with purpose, their decisions change. The question is no longer, what will make me more successful? The question becomes, what will make my life meaningful? Those two questions sometimes lead to the same choices, but often they do not. Meaningful choices are not always the ones that bring the fastest rewards. Sometimes they require sacrifice. Sometimes they require slowing down. Sometimes they require walking away from opportunities that once seemed impossible to refuse. But those choices protect something far more valuable than recognition. They protect the soul. This is where many people rediscover something they once knew but slowly forgot. Life was never meant to revolve entirely around achievement. It was meant to revolve around transformation. The transformation of the human heart. Becoming more compassionate, more humble, more patient, more generous, more connected with God. These qualities rarely make headlines. They rarely bring public admiration. But they shape the deepest kind of success a person can experience. Because when the soul grows stronger, everything else in life begins to find its proper place. Ambition no longer controls the person. It becomes a tool. Success no longer defines identity. It becomes a platform for purpose. Influence no longer feeds the ego. It becomes an opportunity to serve something greater than oneself. This shift is what separates two very different kinds of success. One kind of success builds an impressive life on the outside. The other kind builds a meaningful life from the inside. And when a person finally understands this difference, everything changes. They may still pursue excellence. They may still build great things. They may still achieve extraordinary results. But the motivation behind those actions becomes completely different. They are no longer chasing success to prove their worth. They are using success to express their purpose. And that subtle difference transforms the entire journey. Because when purpose guides success, the soul is no longer sacrificed along the way. It grows stronger. The person becomes more grounded, more aware of what truly matters, more connected to the people and values that once anchored their life. And most importantly, they begin living with a sense of peace that success alone could never provide. The kind of peace that comes from knowing your life is aligned with something deeper than achievement, aligned with truth, aligned with purpose, aligned with God. This does not mean the journey suddenly becomes easy. Life will still bring challenges. There will still be difficult choices, moments of uncertainty, moments when the world pressures you to chase things that no longer feel right. But when a person has redefined success, those moments become easier to navigate because they now understand something they once overlooked. Success is not about gaining the entire world. Success is about gaining the life your soul was created to live. And the tragedy many people discover too late is this. A person can gain the whole world and slowly lose themselves along the way. But the beautiful truth is that this loss is not always permanent, because the moment someone becomes aware of it, the journey back to the soul can begin. And that journey is often the most meaningful success a person will ever achieve. There is a quiet truth that many people only discover after years of chasing success. A truth that often arrives late in the journey. Sometimes after the promotions, after the recognition, after the applause, after the goals that once felt impossible have finally been reached. And that truth is this. Success alone was never the destination. It was never supposed to be the center of life. Because success is powerful. It can open doors. It can create opportunities. It can give a person influence, resources, and the ability to impact the world. But success is only a tool. And like any tool, its value depends on how it is used. Used well, it can build something meaningful. Used without reflection, it can slowly consume the person who pursued it. This is why the most important question about success is not how high you can climb. The most important question is who you are becoming while you climb. Because life quietly shapes the soul in the middle of every pursuit. Every decision leaves a mark. Every compromise moves the heart slightly in one direction or another. Every priority slowly builds the kind of person you will eventually become. And over time, those small decisions create a life. Not just a successful life, but a life with a certain kind of soul. Some people reach the top of their ambitions only to realize something unsettling. They achieved everything they worked for, but along the way they lost the very things that once made the journey meaningful. The relationships that once grounded them, the faith that once guided them, the sense of purpose that once made every step feel significant. Without those things, success can feel strangely empty, impressive to the world, but incomplete inside the heart. Yet the story does not have to end there. Because one of the most beautiful truths about life is that awareness creates the possibility of change. The moment a person recognizes that something is out of alignment, they gain the ability to realign it. They can slow down. They can ask deeper questions. They can rebuild the priorities that once shaped their life. This kind of realignment does not require abandoning success. It requires redefining it. True success is not measured only by what you accomplish. It is measured by what your accomplishments do to your soul. Do they make you more compassionate, more humble, more generous, more connected to God and to the people around you? Or do they slowly push those things aside in the pursuit of something larger but less meaningful? The world will always encourage a certain definition of success. More influence, more visibility, more achievement. But the soul quietly measures something else. Integrity, faith, character, love, purpose. These are the things that remain when everything else fades. Because one day, every career ends. Every achievement becomes part of the past. Every moment of recognition eventually disappears into history. But the person you became along the way remains. The impact you had on others remains. The faith you carried through life remains. The love you shared remains. And those things are not built through ambition alone. They are built through intentional choices. Choosing purpose over ego. Choosing integrity over shortcuts. Choosing relationships over constant busyness. Choosing faith over fear. These choices may not always bring the fastest success, but they build something far more valuable. They build a life where success and the soul move in the same direction. A life where achievement does not replace purpose, but expresses it. A life where influence does not inflate the ego, but becomes an opportunity to serve something greater. This is the kind of success that does not slowly drain the spirit. It strengthens it. It deepens it. It turns success into something meaningful rather than something consuming. And perhaps that is the most important realization of all. The world may measure success by what you gain, but heaven measures success by who you become. So as you continue moving forward in life, chasing dreams, building opportunities, and pursuing excellence, remember the question that matters most. Not just, how far can I go? But also, who will I become on the way there? Because the greatest success a person can ever achieve is not gaining the entire world. The greatest success is building a life where, in the end, you still recognize your own soul.